So living in balance. The word balance there is really one possible translation of a Pali word, upekkha, which is usually translated as equanimity. That's a mouthful, equanimity, and is an English word. But it's an extremely important factor of mind. In fact, it represents the maturity of a person's practice. In some ways, it's what we mature into, is a sense of equanimity or even-mindedness. I'd just like to talk a little bit about what that is. You could think of it as the well, put it this way: if you could think of enlightened emotions, this would be a key one. Enlightened emotions. There's actually, 4 that are named as what the state of mind of somebody who's really awake is. There's loving kindness or goodwill toward beings. There's compassion, feeling for people suffering. There's sympathetic joy, taking joy in other people's well-being. Then there's equanimity or balance. There's a quality of mind that grounds all the other ones that seem to be more heartfelt, loving kindness and compassion, joy, all one can kind of imagine the heart's kind of radiance and its engagement with the world. And then equanimity is sort of grounding it and deepening it. It could be said to be the deepest of all of them, the deepest feeling state. And it represents the state of a heart that's wide open. Put it that way. Equanimity, wide open, in balance that way. So there's a sense of balance, there's a sense of poise. In our idea of emotion, they tend towards drama. They tend towards storm and stress, fear, grief, anger, worry. Our sense of emotions are often troubled that way. They're like a sense of turmoil. Whereas equanimity points to a deep sense of quiet and ease, and a lack of that turmoil, sense of peace. And sometimes it's hard for us to imagine what that is in our world of turmoil. It's part of the bias of the mind that it notices the drama, it notices the strong emotional states that are in turmoil, and it doesn't tend to notice the subtler ones, which are actually, in some sense, deeper, more profound, like equanimity. I think of equanimity as sort of like the equivalent in the mind of the healthy glow that you see in people who, are just have strong and healthy bodies, and you can kind of see in their face and in their way they hold themselves that there's a kind of a well-being that is visible in them. Equanimity is maybe not as visible as physical health, but it has that same sort of radiance. It's a very energetic quality. And that is a paradox to many people, that one can have, that equanimity can be an energetic, engaged quality of mind. Whereas often we think of quiet and ease as being somewhat disengaged and somewhat maybe, withdrawn or stand back. There's, sometimes people confuse this state of balance with certain shutdown states that we get ourselves into. So, insensitivity or indifference, where we just don't care. If it's not happening to me, if it's not happening to members of my family, I don't want to know about it. I don't care. And I don't want to suffer with the knowledge of it. So there's a kind of a protective stance that often the mind takes. And that kind of being chilled out, you could call indifference or apathy. And equanimity as a healthy kind of state of mind is very full of flow and flex. It doesn't get stuck. And that's maybe what we often think of as equanimity, the way that we don't get stuck in things, the way that we don't get reactive to the things that occur to us, and the way that we let things go easily. Those two qualities, non-reactivity, letting go, are really right there at the heart of staying in balance, the heart of equanimity. And so when I give the meditation instructions, in some ways, they are instructions in equanimity. They are beginning practice. Meditation is a practice right from the beginning of equanimity. So I give the instructions, to be equally open to pleasant and unpleasant and neutral sensations. Well, that's not the natural tendency of the mind. The natural tendency of the mind is when something hurts, you get kind of upset about it in a certain way. You might quietly get upset, but your mind jumps into action about how can I shift? Can I do something to make this better? Can it go away? What's the problem? Am I getting sick? Is something unhealthy? There begins this process of reaction to it and aversion, like wanting to get away. Don't like that, want to get away. When something really pleasant comes, then the mind's tendency, its natural tendency is, oh, I want more of that. Come on. Can I hold on to that particular kind of state that I'm in, or that particular feeling that I'm having? And so the imbalance of the mind is right there in our meditation practice, where we push away something we don't like, and we try to hold on to and pull toward us the different things that we do like. And the result of that is imbalance. The result of that is we're in a very reactive state. And it's kind of the opposite of letting go. We're not letting certain things happen, or we think we can do that by pushing them away, and we're trying to make things happen. And right in there is our sense of ego, which is like congratulating ourselves if it can get whatever it is we want. In other words, if we can get more of the goodies, then we feel good about ourselves. If we can push away the baddies, we feel good about ourselves. But there's a shadow to that too, because when we're hurting anyway, even though we're pushing it away and feeling a kind of a aversion to it, we feel defeated, we feel ashamed, we feel ineffective. And so right in there, in the middle of the meditation, is very likely to be a person, a sense of a person and a sense of a self is trying to get you what you want and avoid what you don't want. So the instructions of the meditation is to begin to have some sense of how to be that's not that, that's not pushing away, pulling toward, and fretting, and measuring yourself by how well you're doing it. All of those things. So when I, say there's nothing to do, there's no one to become, all of those sort of things, they're words that are trying to relax the sense of self. For a sense of self is often wrapped up in what it is we want to get, what it is we want to become. And frankly, people come to these classes because they want something, right? You're not here completely without that. The paradox is that what you want, perhaps peace, perhaps a more wholesome state of mind, is best gotten through relaxation and letting go. So we're kind of paradoxically here trying to teach egos that really mostly know how to cling and push away, how to do something different. How to, what is it that allows us to do something different? And so in the midst of that kind of tendency of the mind, there's a kind of a place of balance that you can find, even for just moments, meditating, where you're just with what is. You're just paying attention wisely and mindfully to whatever is in your experience. And part of that wisdom, part of that wise attention, which is the basis of balance and equanimity, is the way that you notice things as they are, accept them, let them be. It's part of the balance, the non-reactivity of your engagement with what is. And I use the word engagement. I think it's important that this is not a disengaged equanimity. It's not about disengagement with the moment. Partly why I say enjoy the breath. Enjoyment has in itself a sense of relaxed engagement with an experience. You're actually letting it touch you. Of course, perhaps not reachable when something quite unpleasant is going on. Maybe enjoyment isn't going to be reachable. But nonetheless, one may find just acceptance or equanimity with whatever's arising, with whatever's present. Part of why we go through the body, all the parts, I love the body scan, is that it's equal. I don't really time myself, so it's possible that some of the body parts don't get equal time, some might get more. That's not intentional, but it happens. But it's really the case that we get a little fixated in the body, especially the places that hurt, the places that ache. And, the older you get, the more of them there seem to be. But even when you're young, you can injure something and find yourself, with something that isn't feel so great. And so to be level-minded with it, to be even-minded with it, and open-hearted with it is a really powerful, important skill. Really powerful and important. And entirely possible. I'm hoping at some point in this course, those of you who do have physical pain may notice moments, just moments, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be forever, nothing is, but just moments where you're completely relaxed with something unpleasant in the body. Completely relaxed with it. It's like, okay, this is happening. I don't tense up around it. I'm not like pushing it, just completely okay with it. And maybe even, and this is a little more than equanimity, but it goes along with equanimity. It goes along with an open heart. Maybe there's just kind of an openness to this is what a human life is like. A little compassion mixed in there, right? A little goodwill too mixed in there toward whatever body part is not so happy. I know that it's really easy when something is hurting me for the mind to get hard and hateful. Hateful is maybe a strong word, but to turn against it, to see it as something wrong, In some sense, it is wrong. It's that, the body's ailing in some way. It's not exactly the way things are meant to go, but it's also completely normal. It's completely normal for unpleasant experiences to be happening in the body. And it's completely normal to be injured. It's completely normal to be sick. It's completely normal to grow old. It's completely normal to die. All those things are kind of part of what we are here for. And it's part of the importance of balance is that we learn to walk in this world of suffering. We learn to walk with balance in a world in which suffering happens. Suffering happens. It does. So you'll notice kind of in some ways, there are moments when reactivity possesses you. Some kind of reactivity possesses you. And there are moments when you feel not possessed by that. We could say self-possessed. Buddhism self is not necessarily the right word, but in English it works pretty well to describe the state of equanimity, being in balance, being in the center of one's being. So what I will ask you to do in the course of this course is to sharpen your attention, sharpen your antenna for when you are in a balance and when you're not. We'll be talking about finding balance when you're out of balance, when you have a sense of really being drawn down a rabbit hole of reactivity. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about just staying in balance. The thing I can say about that, though, which is really important, is that staying in balance is not so much about trying really hard to stay in balance. Equanimity is not something that you can will yourself to have. It isn't. It's something that matures slowly in time as you develop a certain wisdom about yourself and about things, as you see them more clearly, and various shifts happen inside you. It is in some sense the fruit that comes from applying your attention over a long time to very basic parts of your experience. So I say that because as you notice yourself kind of getting reactive through the week, as we all do, it's helpful not to take the frame of reference that you've lost the game or you've failed the course, you're failing the course. Every experience is an opportunity to learn. And just seeing how you get out of balance is an opportunity to learn. And if you can accept the frame of reference that there's maybe something that's not quite mature in your heart yet, and be patient, I think that would be a more appropriate frame of reference for understanding the lack of equanimity that you're likely to observe. And we'll also be, looking at our states more precisely because sometimes equanimity is really something a part of us is faking. trying to look chill, right? So you can not look reactive when you are. Just be honest with yourself about that. And then there are times when you actually don't seem reactive, but you're kind of shut down. You're kind of not open or sensitive. And this is a really difficult one to see. In Buddhism, when we talk about certain states, we talk about their far enemies and their near enemies. Far enemies are easy to see of equanimity. When you're completely off balance and reactive, when you're restless and anxious, and your mind's hopping all over the place, there's no equanimity. Okay, that's easy to see. So that's the far enemy of equanimity. Easy to see. The near enemies are not so easy to see. The near enemies of insensitivity, the near enemy of indifference. So we go to a non-feeling state so we're not reactive. We shut our energies down a bit so we're not reactive. That's not the same as equanimity. It might look good, it might kind of approximate it, but I'd like you to be sensitive to that. When there's a kind of state of peace that's just somewhat shut down. I mean, a lot of our exhausted states can be like that, There's a certain peace at the end of the day in the evening when you're exhausted, And you don't have the energy to be too engaged. But the equanimous state is actually an energetic engagement, an awake but calm and easeful presence with things. Sometimes it's called the flow state. That seems to be a popular thing, but that gives you the idea that you're not trying to hold yourself or hold yourself away from something when you're equanimous. You're actually in a flow state. You're actually not resisting what is. You're going with it. And it doesn't trip you up. It doesn't make you fall apart or be imbalanced. And you'll notice that in yourself. It happens. Equanimity happens. The jar falls on the floor and shatters, and you just go, oh, okay. Not a disaster, not a big problem. Your spouse says that thing that tends to drive you nuts. And you just go, oh, okay, there it is. And you're not necessarily put in a reactive state, nor are you closed down to it. It's not that you're just kind of distant, but it's like the mind is noticing, the heart is open and noticing and present and engaged. And the balance sometimes just happens almost of its own. And that's the real maturity of equanimity. It's a kind of balance that you can't engineer, that starts to mature as you really pay attention to your experience and as you negotiate all the ins and outs of your engagement with things. You find a way to be engaged. You find what that is to be engaged from a place of ease and peace and flow and non-resistance. Okay, so this may sound like a pretty high bar. As I said in the beginning, this is kind of where it all points to. This is where the practice matures to. And I just felt called to talk about it this time, this course. When I figure out the titles of my courses, I have to spend a little time with like, what do I want to talk about? What do I have anything to say about? And what's kind of coming through? What's coming through? And however that worked, sense of balance, sense of non-reactivity was coming through this time. And so we'll be talking more about that. And I'm looking forward to you sharing just not only about your experiences of equanimity, but your experiences of lack of equanimity and what happened when you actually showed up there, when you actually noticed. And that will be a lot of what we can talk about here.